The director of the film, Elia Kazan, has never taken much credit for that extraordinarily memorable scene. He said, I just stepped back and these two actors did it.
The best way to describe that scene is you had two people in combat. Also, while we were together, there was some kind of a chemistry between us.
Everything in the movie was compressed, so to speak, into that scene. And then what makes it so extraordinary is the choices. The choices that were made by Brando and by Steiger and by Kazan in that scene are amazing.
Brando demonstrates just about everything that you could possibly ever want to see an actor do.
Elia Kazan believes that On the Waterfront is one of his finest films. He doesn't call it great, but it meant a great deal to him to do this movie because it was about betrayal. It was about, in a way, people think it was a kind of reflection of what he had gone through when he named names, although he says it wasn't. But in any event, what it meant to him was, I think, more than anything, was to do a picture with Brando about a man who has a conscience and who lives up to his beliefs and his values. And I think this was very important to Kazan.
I really got to do On the Waterfront because of a thing I did on television called Marty. Kazan heard about it. He said, well, you go read with Bud Schulberg the taxi scene in this thing called On the Waterfront because Schulberg wrote it, and if he likes you, you can play Marlon Brando's brother. Well, I had just seen Mr. Brando 2 weeks before in Streetcar, named Desire, in which he was absolutely brilliant. So I was a nervous wreck. And anyway, I read, and Schulberg's liked me, and I got to do it.
This scene had so many wonderful elements because you felt you were there at a moment when two brothers were confronting each other in a way that one shouldn't really be privy to.
Two men, brothers, in a fundamental relationship, discussing the core issue of the film, which is whether or not he will cooperate with the government and, in the opinion of Rod Steiger's character, Lee Cobb's character, rat on his fellow longshoreman, or will go along with the way things are on the waterfront.
The desperation and the crux of my character is, he says, when Marlon's character says, well, I can't make up my mind, and I say, you better make up your mind before we go to 564 so-and-so street. And it's all out. It's all been revealed. And he knows now, you know, my brother knows that I have almost become a traitor to him, who I love dearly, you know. I'm trying to do the impossible, which is to convince my brother, who is right, to do something wrong, to the point that I take a gun out. And only when I take the gun out and see the gun in my hand, and he pushes it down with his hand, do I realize how much these ambitious dreams have poisoned my relationship to my own brother even. And thank God I did, otherwise I would have shot him.
What Steiger does is takes from Brando the fact that Brando refuses to be either intimidated or angered by that gun. And when that happens, Charlie is completely disarmed, not just by the fact of the gun, but he's disarmed emotionally. And you notice what he does in the scene? He sits back. And for the rest of the scene, he more or less sits back staring into the future. The future, of course, includes his death now, because he can't deliver. And his performance is as remarkable as Marlon's, and as truthful as Marlon's, and I'm sure it came from Marlon, just as Marlon's performance came from Steiger. The choices that were made by Brando and by Steiger and by Kazan in that scene are amazing. Think about the scene for a moment. It could have been a typical scene of gangster conflict. Brother pulls a gun, says, you're not going to testify. He says, I don't know if I'm going to testify now. They could have fought each other in that little back seat, and it would have been like every scene you've ever seen on that subject. Instead, it was like no scene you've ever seen on that subject. What was it? It was a love scene. It was a scene about a failed love, about a lost love. When Rod pulls the gun and points it at his brother. What does Marlon do? Every other actor alive would have made a different choice. He would have pushed it away. He would have argued with him. He would have been angered at him. He would have been furious. What does Marlon do? He takes the gun as he would take Eva Marie Saint's hand in a love scene and pushes it away. He says, "Oh, Charlie." And when he says, "Oh, Charlie," it is heartbreak, not anger. It's the loss of this relationship, which is the only thing this poor, beaten man had left. And he pushes it away.
It's heartbreaking because it's about a guy, a young boy who looked up to his older brother, the way in which all human beings look up to someone to guide them, to protect them, to look after them, to teach them, and then are disappointed by them.
They are saying things to each other, or at least Terry, Marlon's character, is saying things that he's never said before. He could have been somebody. No, it was you, Charlie. It was you. I mean, that kind of an accusation, that kind of stuff coming up from his insides, basically saying, you ruined my life. I trusted you and you let me down. And that's an enormously meaningful moment, particularly when played by two rather exceptional actors.
The love of a brother conquered. And there's no doubt that behind it all was the love of his brother. Otherwise, he would have shot him. Because what happens? What does it mean when he doesn't shoot him? He's going to get killed. He knows that. So if you want to talk about how much you can love a brother, that's about as far as you can go. That kind of love, yeah. And you find him hanging on a hook later on, my character. And he knew it. And there was no way he could get away, So if you want to say it was a sacrifice of brotherly love,
It's a perfectly written film, of course, by Schulberg. But in that scene, you see one of the greatest examples on film or on stage that I know of two actors and a director making choices that are unique to them, that are unforgettable, and that have made, imagine, a 4-minute scene, one of the most famous moments in the history of acting.
Now we come on the set and there's half a taxi, so the camera can shoot from the front and back. And a steering wheel in the seat for the taxi driver and us in the back. And Kazan and Spiegel are at it. Kazan said, I can't shoot the bloody thing. So what am I going to do? There's no back projection. I can't go in. You look right out and you see the studio wall in back of the taxi. Because we were in the studio about 20 by 20. Put your hands out, you touch the wall.
Sam Spiegel was being a cheapskate, and he did not get a real cab for the two actors to act in. And so they had to kind of improvise with kind of an old, part of a cab, and then they used lighting to make it seem as if they were really driving along a road.
And of course, Spiegel saying, Gutch, please, Gutch, darling, with your talent, darling, you can do this, He said, never mind that crap. I can't do it. And a guy, one of the men who worked on the film said, I came in a taxi this morning that had a Venetian blind. And Kazan screamed, get me a Venetian blind. And they got a Venetian blind and they cut it to fix the back window.
Apparently the rear screen projection didn't show up, and which means, the traffic in the streets and the cars. So the scene would have been a much brighter scene had the light from the outside been coming into the taxi. Kazan put a Venetian blind in the back window, which closed off the outside world. Now, how many times have you seen a New York or New Jersey taxi cab with a Venetian blind blocking out the back window? Taxi cabs are open. People can jump out the door. And there's life going on outside. So when you have a Venetian blind closed, dark, and the taxi cab having this kind of pressure cooker feeling with this incredibly deep and meaningful conversation between two brothers. So all of that added to that scene. It created a much greater intimacy than would ordinarily take place in a taxi cab, excepting That's a specific taxi cab. We must know that at the end of the scene, because the guy who's driving it is going to take Rod Steiger on a one-way trip.
Elia Kazan, he said, gee, we had this little, half a taxi cab so you get the camera in. And the stagehands were just kind of rocking it, and there were some lights that Boris Kaufman arranged that sort of looked like headlights going past occasionally. He said, I just stepped back and these two actors did it. Kazan is not a notably modest guy. I suspect that that's the truth of the matter, that this thing just got going and those two guys just ripped.
Kazan described it, I found out later, he said, oh, it was wonderful to watch these two young bulls locking horns. He's a bit of a sadist. He couldn't wait to see what one is going to pull out for the other, right?
Probably Steiger gets less credit for it than Brando, and that there may be sort of unfairness in that. The responsiveness of Steiger to Brando is very significant. He is really giving him the things that he needs, not just as an actor, as a character, to play the scene.
Steiger's choices were right. He could, when his brother refused to cooperate with the mob, have been threatening. It could have looked like a Jimmy Cagney scene. Jimmy Cagney's an okay actor, nothing wrong with him. But it would have been different. But what he got from Marlon, he used. Marlon's sorrow, when you began it with, oh, Charlie, immediately caught Steiger.
I got in the cab, I was a nervous wreck. We started to roll, they said action, we started to shoot the scene, and he says, what do you think of the Yankees? That's not in the script. But we both come from the same kind of training. I said, well, maybe he's leading up to something. I said, I think they're all right. He said, well, I was wondering how they do. I said, well, I don't know. I don't understand you. And when you're in a situation like that, you merely have to say what you're thinking within the framework of what the playwright has created. I said, I don't understand you, which was true. Our father, we came from Brooklyn, if you remember, and he used to break our rear ends to go see the Dodgers. We got sick of eating too many hot dogs. Cut. Okay, now I'm a nervous wreck. I said, well, maybe he's looking for something. I don't know. So he says, they roll again, and he says, well, how's Mom? That's not in the script either.
Brando had disagreed with certain things in the scene, and that's why he was improvising so much. And finally, he and Schulberg supposedly did have a talk where he told him why he disagreed with certain things about the scene, and one of them was he didn't feel that he could talk to his brother calmly with a gun stuck beneath his ribs. So Kazan told him, do something, improvise on that. And he did by gently pushing the gun away and saying, oh, Charlie.
Then I remember Kazan's voice saying, Buddy, stop the crap. Buddy was Marlon's name for close friends, was Buddy. And then we shot. We did a two-shot, which means the both of us. Then they did a shot over my shoulder on him during the scene. Then they turned around and they're going to do a shot over his shoulder on me doing the scene. And I'm sitting there and said, what happened? And Kazan said, I let Marlon go home. He said he was tired. Had to see an analyst. Well, I couldn't believe this because this is probably the worst thing you could do to a so-called colleague, And I was tears in my eyes almost, because also at that time, one of our strongest father images was Elia Kazan. And I couldn't believe. So I did the scene with the continuity guy, Guy Tomajan was his name, reading Marlon's part.
Steiger never knew that he was leaving for the analyst appointment. He'd left every afternoon at 4 o'clock to see a shrink, and I think it got Steiger pretty angry at the time.
I think if I have to be honest about it, which I hope I am, what happened then was, you son of a bitch, I got a little bit of talent, I'll show you too. And I did my part. Here is a classic example, in my mind, of one of the greatest sources of creativity, which is terror. You're frightened to death, you cannot do it. And if you have some kind of talent, somehow you do it, and not only that, but all the energy of fear gets into an energy of creating, and you do it made it better than you could have ever done in your life. Now, maybe that's what happened to me in the back of the taxi. I was lost, frightened, hurt, embarrassed, but I had to do it. So he might have helped me by going. I mean, I wish he stayed there because we might have found a lot of other things.
It was an unhappy experience for him in many ways. He was going through a lot. His mother had died recently. He was deep in analysis. He was very depressed. He didn't think he was very good, you know. He did not like himself in this movie when he first saw it. Kazan showed a rough cut of the movie to Leonard Bernstein, who was going to do the score, and he asked Brando and Karl Malden to come and watch. And during the movie, Sam Spiegel was constantly saying, you know, it's not very good. It could be much better. And Kazan was saying, it's great, it's wonderful, shut up. And Brando didn't say anything. And when it was over, he left without commenting. And Karl Malden ran after him and said, what do you think? Don't you think it's great? And Brando said, in and out, in and out. He did not think he was that good. He never did.
The thing that really makes, in some ways, Brando so extraordinary is that he is, on the one hand, the ultimate male, macho, tough guy. And on the other hand, he is the ultimate female. He is so soft and sweet and vulnerable. And he manages to keep the male and female going at the same time throughout the movie and throughout the performance. And that's a balancing act that is so hard to do.
Periodically, Marlon calls me to tell me he doesn't want to be on Inside the Actors Studio because he won't do television. And we talk for 45 minutes. They're wonderful phone calls, but I was asking, why are you calling me if you don't want to be on it? Anyway, we talk. And at one point he said to me, why do you want me on Inside the Actors Studio? And I said, do you want an honest answer? He said, of course. I said, because you're the best actor I've ever seen in my life. And I said, I'm not talking about the movie Streetcar and On the Waterfront and Viva Zapata. I saw you on the stage in Streetcar. I saw you in Truckline Cafe. I saw you in your first Broadway appearance in I Remember Mama. And I said, during the first act, I was very nervous. All of us were in the audience. I thought, this guy doesn't know his lines. Something's wrong. He's not like the rest of the cast. But no, during the third act, I decided something's going on. This is the beginning of a new kind of acting. That was the first time I saw Marlon Brando.
Both actors were trained at the Actors Studio, which, by the way, Kazan started. And one of the tenets of that sort of training, which was the method as it was derived from the Moscow Arts Theater, started by Konstantin Stanislavski, is that you always do everything as an actor within the given circumstances that you are presented with in the material.
One of the most important aspects of method acting is the attempt to be as real and truthful to the individual self. It's a revolt against layering on some surface element that is somehow not genuine. Another aspect that all schools of the method or the Stanislavski system use are various forms of improvisation. They're very open to the accident of the moment. There is a scene in On the Waterfront that illustrates this very well, a scene between Marlon Brando and Eva Marie Saint, where he's walking with her and clearly interested in her, and at some point she accidentally dropped a pair of gloves she was holding. And he picks up the gloves, and before he hands them back to her, he's handling them. He even puts his hand in them. And suddenly this simple little action becomes very revealing of his feelings towards her, some aspects of his own personality, the tough outer guy and the sensitivity within. And when Elia Kazan was questioned about the brilliance of putting this in, he said, the only thing I could get credit for was knowing not to call cut when it happened. But he knew Brando would make something interesting of it. And this was his way of working with Marlon Brando. He gave him a lot of credit and invested a lot in his own insights into what he was doing.
Kazan loved the fact that he was doing it on location, on the waterfront. He loved doing things on location because it was more, it was real, it was gritty, it was, the weather was terrible. He was glad, actually, that it was so cold because he said it made the actors seem more human. They were freezing cold.
Kazan recognized in Schulberg and Schulberg in Kazan the possibility of that kind of collaboration, where Kazan could design a movie as a director that was perfectly crafted to the way in which Schulberg was writing, the way in which he wrote On the Waterfront, that spare but often poetic dialogue. And the result is this nearly perfect motion picture in which there is an absolute harmony between the intentions of the playwright, in this case the screenwriter, the overall direction of the director, Kazan, and the, in the moment, belief of every second, every frame of this film by the actors.
I wanted to make a film about the waterfront, and I was working with Arthur Miller on a film about Red Hook, about the waterfront in Brooklyn. And for various reasons, pressures, political pressures, and one thing or another, that broke up. And I still was determined to do it. I thought it was exciting. I was reading about it all the time. I saw it all the time. I used to walk around a lot then. I'm part of the city, so to say. You know, I'm not living in California. I'm living in New York City, and that's different. And just like the taxi strike, I was in the taxi strike and so forth. I mean, all those things were real to me because I lived in them. Anyway, I said to Bud Schulberg, I said, that thing just broke up. He said, I've been working on a story about the waterfront for a long time. And he had these articles by Johnson and so forth, and he let me read the script, and I thought the script could be helped, and we worked on the script together. We'd also met a fellow in Hoboken, in whose house we had dinner several times. His name was Tony Mike, and he went through the exact same experience. So I got to know him, and he would tell me about what he went through and what he felt, and the scorn thrown at him. And I'd had a good deal of scorn thrown at me in those years, so I was hefty. I could take it. And he too, but he was tough. He was ready to fight all the time, and that helped me a lot, seeing this man that went through the whole damn thing that On the Waterfront was about, and it was in a fury about it. So it was a great experience all along. I used to hang out in Hoboken, but not like Bud did. Bud was there all the time. Bud lived there. I mean, it was a great, great writing experience for me to watch him put that film together. Bud was great. He never stopped work. He never stopped work. And I said to him, this is just the thing for Zanuck. This is right down Zanuck's line. He loves violent stories about big cities and so forth. And I showed it to Zanuck, and he said, make some suggestions, and he did. And then one day he called us into his office and said, I'm not going to do this. I don't like it. And in came a terrible, terrible guy that I'm not very fond of now, named Sam Spiegel. And he was down on his uppers. He was broke. He had trouble. He needed something that paid him producer expenses and so forth. But he also needed something to do. And Bud came into my office. We were also in the same hotel. Fox was still paying our expenses. And Bud said, he's going to do it. I said, no, you're kidding. He said, no, he's going to do it. He means it. So then we spoke to Sam and said, I'm going to do it right away. He said, let's go to New York. So we went to New York. Well, Sam drove Schulberg crazy. And he said, let's open it up again. Let's open it again. Let's re-examine it. Let's see if we've got it right. And he worked on that script, thinning it down and tightening it up. And Bud was great. He never stopped. And between them, they worked like hell. And I think, although they had a lot of antagonisms, I tell the thing in my book, but I'll tell it again too. One night, Bud was living in the country in Pennsylvania, and one night his wife woke up about 3:30 in the morning and looked in the bathroom, and Bud was shaving. And she said, "Bud, what the hell are you shaving for at 3:30 in the morning?" He said, "I'm going to New York." He said, "What are you going to New York for?" I said, "I'm going to New York to kill Sam Spiegel." He was that mad at him, you know. He did go to New York, but he never killed Sam Spiegel. Sam Spiegel was a very tough guy. Tough because, I guess, of his experience in Europe, because he just escaped with his life, I imagine. And he kept at it, and Bud kept at it. And then we were lucky enough to get Marlon in it. And so we made a film that is, from the point of view of a screenplay, I think perfect. It's a wonderful screenplay with a wonderful actor, and it worked out well. Also, by then, I was trained to work with people on location, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the longshoremen. We had longshoremen extras. I liked them a lot. And I used to have a bodyguard, but only once was it necessary. One fellow was going to punch me out, but my bodyguard came up and pushed him against the wall, and that was settled. It was a great experience for me because I was on my feet all the time in the city, and I think from that point of view, it's as close as I ever came to making a film exactly the way I want. It was a cold winter, and we were shooting it in the winter. And as we went along, it was more and more into the winter, more and more cold, and rain, and we never stopped shooting. And we had these great barrels there, and people would break down boxes, and the longshoremen throw them in the thing. We had hot boxes all the time. And Brando, sometimes I had to go into a hotel. I find what it's called, the Majestic Hotel, some phony name. I had to go in and drag him out because it was too cold out there. He's not very hardy in some ways. And also the cold helped the actors' faces. They looked a certain way. They were sunk in here. They didn't have this lovely flesh of success that leading men and act in Hollywood have. The dimpled, pink, beautiful complexion. They were miserable-looking human beings, and that includes Brando. And Eva Saint was perfect, just a thin little, seemingly undernourished Catholic girl, over-proper Catholic girl. It really was terrific cast. But when I think back on it, it was Bud's persistence and Spiegel's insistence that helped make that movie, and what Brando contributed to it. Just externally, he's very gritty. I mean, he liked the streets. He liked those people. He liked the longshoremen. He used to lay around on the roof and talk to them. But that wasn't it. The thing is that in Brando, there's an ambivalent side, and the ambivalence consists of a toughness, an exterior toughness, and a tremendous desire for gentleness and tenderness. And the best scenes in the movie, from my point of view, are the love scenes with Eva Saint, where he's asking her to understand him, where they're sitting in a cafe. He's great in those scenes. Why? Because he's a tough guy revealing a side to himself that you did not expect. And the side to himself that you did not expect, that exists in the audience because they recognize it, was some sort of tenderness and some sort of, people wanted to reach out for him to help him. And at the same time, he was a son of a bitch and a bad person and a betrayer. Still, you wanted to help him. And she did too. And that came off, you know, that part of it came off. He has that ambivalence in him. I was lucky I had him. It worked out well because he's both hardy and indifferent, at the same time wants you to love him very much. When he plays those scenes with her, I'm broken up. I break up. That one person should need so much from another person in the way of tenderness and all that. Well, we all do, don't we? We all marry or hopefully hook up with some lady that's going to make us feel we're okay and we're better and all that. And we search for it and want it and crave it and all that. And sometimes it happens. And sometimes it happens for a while. And something in that basic story, I think, is what stirs people, not the social, political thing so much as the human element in it. What can I say about that scene? Everybody's seen it so often, there's nothing I can say. It's played all the time. I'll say this, that I think the two actors made it. I didn't do any directing with it. I mean, believe it, it's true. I mean, I'm not a falsely modest man, but we had a very bad thing from Spiegel. He didn't get us a set. We only had a shell of a taxi cab. We had a good cameraman, he solved that, but we came there at 11 o'clock in the morning. We were very discouraged. So I just put the two actors in the back seat, and he flicked some lights on, and we had a little sound effect. And then they acted the scene, and they knew the characters by then. They liked each other, Rod and Marlon, and the scene just rolled off without, I mean, it sounds falsely modest, but it's not. I didn't really direct the scene. They did it. They made the scene, those two men. And it's a big lesson, you know, if you get to a certain point with actors, they know what the hell they're doing, and the script is right, the scene is right. How are you going to beat? I could have been a contender. You can't beat that line. It is a wonderful line. That's Bud's line. And Bud wrote the scene beautifully. I don't understand how people caught on the waterfront that fast, because it didn't have a lot of publicity at the beginning. And I went down the morning it opened, and there were 100 people in line. I don't know who the hell was in line. They may have been the hoodlums that heard about it out in Hoboken. I don't know. There they were. And it was just an enormous success immediately. And I'm not sure it was because of what the papers wrote about it. There's something they sensed in it, something of the drama of the ordinary man who has feelings of guilt, who's searching for redemption. Isn't that a big word in the Catholic religion? In all our religions, redemption, redemption. The film, in a way, is about redemption, about a dumb, innocent kid who's done terrible things and wants to be redeemed. And the girl redeems him. Well, it's basic, isn't it?